Okay. So we are live. We have another guest today. I think we're shooting live stream to live stream, and it's great to actually like have this thought leader in the AI agent space. So let's get it started. Sydney, you want to quickly introduce yourself? I don't know if you really need introduction. I think a lot of people see your talks around Devil and more, and also around Gaia. But quickly introduction on yourself.
Yeah, that's super kind. Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. My name is Sydney Lai. I am one of the co-founders of Gaia, and I have spent my career specifically in developer adoption and developer tools. I have worked across 8 different developer tooling and framework, anywhere from Web 2 to Web 3. So you will see my work on Filecoin, the Graph, 0x. You will also see my work in robotic process automation, or RPA, a lot of low-code stuff back in the day, so helping people and companies learn how to automate their whole workflow. So we've seen our tooling be used anywhere from Toyota to Santander's. And how I met my co-founders was actually at Consensus. So a lot of us used to work at Consensus, currently work at Consensus, and I did a lot of the ICOs during that time. So just super glad to be here and really to reconnect with you again.
No, this is actually great. And I didn't know about that. I'm actually a mechanical engineer by background, so a lot of kind of like Simulink, low-level coding was part of the game, right? And it's great. You've been around quite a lot. And yeah, quickly intro about myself. I'm Francesco. I'm leading the developer relation team at Consensus. And yeah, I'm very excited about stuff like MetaMask SDK and Delegation Toolkit. And we're working a lot with Delegation Toolkit, especially on the Gaia side too. So it's there is a lot of things happening. So let's get it started, Sydney. So I mean, how everything is going with like kind of AI agent? Are we in the right kind of track? There is a major framework, with Liza kind of like taking over. We see the same launchpad. We see. Are you afraid about some kind of like agent fragmentation around the ecosystem? What do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think something that Eliza does really beautifully is that it provides you as a developer value proposition immediately. You're able to launch an agent very easily, and it doesn't try to distract you with a lot of bells and whistles. So it makes it really easy for you as a developer to comprehend how to launch an agent. And I think the concept of fragmentation is very interesting. And the reason is because you see a lot of registries pop up, you see a lot of marketplaces pop up, and what you still see is a lot of the old Web 2 problems of having to piecemeal everything together and having to provide a lot of context for AI. I think one of the struggles that we've seen within the last few years was, as much as we want to automate a lot of our workflow, want to automate a lot of our pain points, you still have to provide a lot of context. So one of my biggest passions, rabbit holes, and one of the things I'm really working on right now is understanding how do you create this social graph for AI agents, or really the concept of contextualizing, indexing, and querying a lot of these agents on chain, if possible, off chain. And the reason why this is so important is because you need to be able to make it possible for all of the agents to communicate with each other and to pay each other automatically and within context.
I think this is a good point, right? And one of the things I also want to ask you, that I asked the same question to James, was kind of like, we are getting forks up on forks. I'm afraid to see, like, you remember like all the Dexys forks that kind of took over. I see right now this kind of like trend on agents. You remember when it was like kind of like Sushi Swap with like, like coming out with like, Cafe Swap, Matcha Swap. I remember like 10 in literally like 2 weeks. Like, yeah, like one thing that I want to kind of like be conscious, like, if in 6 months we have, I don't know, think about 500,000 kind of AI agents pushing the same category. First, how we can actually can attest, can track record, do we need to build social graphs around agents? What do we need to do in order kind of to bring, how do you say, transparency, but also a kind of social graph? Because think about agent consumers, they would be the one that actually could get like 10 different agents doing the same things, but I don't know which one to choose, right?
And I think why this is so, you talk about attestation and why this is so important is because, just I think for context, let's talk about the main applications for attestation, especially regarding AI agents. One is that you need to be able to verify that outputs genuinely came from that specific agent. Because if you don't know where does this output come from? Where is this data from? Is this data valid, verified? You also need to prove that the AI's decision-making process or train history, again, is relevant. So this really creates an audible, auditable, auditable trail
Oh,
of the AI
yes.
interaction, because I think to what you said earlier is that this fragmentation, what ends up happening is you have, let's say, the society of AI agents who are unable to communicate with each other because they don't speak the same language, or they're not on the same vibe. They're not on the same wavelength. So you're going to a party, you have all these random people, and they can't really connect with each other. They're not really in the same headspace. And I think what needs to happen is that because we are in Web3, by default, a lot of things are decentralized. A lot of things are kind of standalone. And
Yes.
we now really need to be at a place where we need to think about not just integration, not just hyper modularity, but how do you make these systems work in place? And it kind of goes back to, Francisco, what you and I were saying earlier, taking some models from RPA, taking some models of how do you have different systems as much as legacy, as much as forward thinking technology, but how do you make this whole robotic process automation work and speak to each other and make this whole system play around? If you are solving, let's say, like processing issues for something as large and multinational, and I don't even know how much Toyota makes in a year, but if you can think
Yeah.
of that at that scale, like we also need to think about how do we reach that scale, even just, let's say we're doing airdrops, let's say we're doing meme coins, let's say we're doing, really just code native workflows. If we can scale to the size of Toyota, just a few years ago, how do we scale even just code native, software native programming as well?
Yeah, yeah. I was actually hearing like here in Davos, like some people starting to speak about was that agentic agents or something, like kind of like active agents. They're actually like proactively solving problem solving, and this is kind of like the next step for me, right? Because think about just not just feeding information, fetching data, but I think this is why it's kind of like Web3 is beautiful on that side, because being building an on-chain kind of economy, we have all the kind of like data feed open, so it's kind of like a next level
Mm,
economy. So I think
mm.
that could be very interesting. But any use case that you see right now pushing kind of like harder on verticals? Because I'm hearing, AXPT looking at Kaito social mention, right? AXPT has what 30-40% of the social share. So I see social agents. I see also
Sure.
coordination agents through like Telegram bots and everything. But did you see like other use case or specific use case that you want to kind of highlight for everybody's useful?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, the main question is when you're looking at something like ChatGPT, if you really look at it, it's a no-brainer. I think the beauty of consumer AI isn't how genius or unique it is, but it's how well did they nail down the user experience. Because at the end of the day, most users are familiar with the chat interface, right? If you look at ChatGPT, it is a chat interface that you have experienced with your bank 5, 10 years ago. It's just like,
Yes.
hey, I'm blocked on this. How do I do this? Right. And so right now, I think because we are evolving and building consumer AI so quickly, already we're feeling impatient. We're feeling, okay, right now what we're seeing is, the AI reply guy, which are people responding on Twitter and really automating a lot of communications on Twitter. What we're seeing is a lot of agents in prediction markets, on trading platforms. What we're also seeing a lot is, this multi-party agent ownership, governance, collective knowledge, kind of like what you talked about earlier. And the reason is because these may be governance and knowledge, maybe coordination, maybe it's trading, maybe it's online communications, such as Twitter. This, for a very long time, was a pain point. There was a lot of friction points. And so right now, a lot of agents are fine tuning, how do we make this user experience better, easier, better, easier. And so when we look at something like ChatGPT, what it did really well from an AI consumer standpoint is that it nailed the user experience extremely flawlessly and without need of like an onboarding education. Now, when you say like, Sydney, what else are we seeing in the market? What I'm currently seeing in the market is a lot of these agents are just fine tuning the experiences that we already know because we've had so much friction before. But I think in the next wave, what we're going to see is completely new ideas because we have already satisfied and we have already improved the experiences that we've wanted to fix for so long. So again, if you're on Twitter and you're responding, maybe it's too much friction. Once a market is once a market has a solution to alleviate you of that pain point, of that friction, after that, then you'll see another inflection point of completely brand new ideas. And if you map this user behavior back to the creation of different waves of crypto, you will see, back then, I mean, as I mentioned, I did ICOs back at Consensus. And even back in 2017, 18, they were saying like, hey, I don't know, Ethereum might be too slow. We didn't even have L1s and L2s at the time, And so like once L2s have solved certain transactions, then after that, then they were able to think of completely new products such as liquidity pools or something that requires really like low latency and much higher volume transactions. So I think that's
Yeah.
where we're currently looking at now, and to even ideate what brand new items can come, we are still in the process of fine tuning and fixing a lot of the friction points with AI.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting topic. Also, like cross kind of like cross chain compatibility between agents, kind of all these kind of coordination tasks. I think there will be an interesting use case.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and I'm also thinking about like kind of like other things, but those are definitely the priority. And
Yeah.
I mean, to
May,
the
oh, may,
builder, kind of go for it, go
may
for
I
it.
ask,
Yes, yes. Yeah, of course.
what is kind of your current rabbit hole? What is a rabbit hole that you've been going down? It could be agent related, but I'm curious.
No, I'm thinking. I mean, I'm seeing much more kind of use case needs around permission, kind of like permission and delegation use case,
Yeah.
right? Because right now we're building like smart, smart accounts everywhere. But think about all the other use cases around kind of delegating power or delegating specific action. So right now we always use kind of bots to trigger action, but I'm really looking for when, for example, you're delegating. Could be guardians or like agency to kind of like doing and pushing some specific transaction, because you as the owner of the agent, or even like you as kind of like the main account, you will not be always in charge. You can actually delegate some accesses, delegate some actions. So I think the delegation specific use case is valuable for all the other kind of verticals. Think about the IDs.
If
Yeah.
I may, I think
Hmm.
this
Hmm.
delegation piece that you're talking about, why this is so important and why I believe AI needs to be built collaboratively is because as humans are building AI right now, we need to build this collaboratively because we need to understand how to translate this collaboration framework for AI agents. AI agents need to learn how to collaborate together. Otherwise, it goes back to the fragmentation issue. And so now you
Exactly.
just have a bunch of these siloed AI agents, and they're not very compatible and they're not very effective. And so then you still need human interaction to help bridge that collaboration.
Yes. But then the question I'm asking you is that who is playing the role for standardization around agent kind of like compatibility and building standardization? Like,
Yeah, yeah, that's a really great question in standards, right? I mean, we look at the Ethereum Foundation, right? They release certain standards. Other foundations release other standards. Then you have standards of right? These USB-C, micro, lightning. How are these standards set? I don't know who is responsible for that, but I think that's my personal motivation of building all of these agents together with you, with other people in Mother, with Gaia. I am obsessed with I don't know who's responsible, but I'm willing to put myself out there with us together as the first cohort to make it
yes,
responsible, to make it
yes,
responsible, to have a communication, a collaboration standard. And I think it derives from our collective experience working in DAOs. I think it comes from our experience before DAOs. I used to work at a co-op. I used to work at a co-op in university, in a garden. We've all been to hackathons. Hackathons is a beautiful example of
yes,
cooperative collaboration, right? Literally with strangers, how do you collaborate and follow certain norms? How do you follow certain regulations? And to the most part, somehow hackathons domestically, globally, all kind of follow a similar standard of pitching. It's kind of this weird
Hmm.
human norm, right? And so, yeah, I guess that's kind of the answer from my perspective is I don't know who is responsible, but I'm willing for us as a collaborative unit for us to be responsible. And if something
Yeah.
replaces us or if something takes our standards and brings it to their standards, sure. If their foundation wants to take it,
100%.
sure. But I'm happy
Yes.
to be kind of the cowboys, if you
Yes.
will. Yeah.
Yes. No,
Yeah.
I totally agree on that, and I love the Cowboys analogy. But I want to also say, like, I feel that we're growing at a speed that I think no one was kind of like expecting in terms of like what use case you see in agents, and I think right now if you're not pushing some kind of like could be first standardization, but also like attestation around. Which agent, because I push this tweet about kind of like agent frameworks and this kind of like agent landscape, and I started to see literally same agents scope for a specific vertical. And think about this is now, think about like in like 6 months time, right? So I think building a social graph, but also track record, because I'm looking a lot around use case around, for example, treasury delegation, rebalancing use case for like could be funds portfolio, personal portfolio, and even like guardian and security kind of measures around delegating accounts rights. I think those kind of things, and then you have all the coordination things. I'm seeing like at least like 10 or 15 like agents with specific track record on arbitrage boats between telegrams, right? And I'm asking myself, okay, in 6 months we will get like 200 of those, and when the Francesco consumer will actually be able to see which one is performing the best, or at least which one has a track record they can trust. So we need to have some kind of attestation system and a track record. If not, like we'll kind of like, I don't know, will be very difficult for people that are coming in the agent space, or at least they want to automatize things, to actually get what is better or what is kind of like an historic track record.
I think that's beautifully said. If I may
Mm-hmm.
challenge, I think
Mm-hmm.
trust and market saturation is a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Yes.
mind. I don't think I mind having a market saturation of, let's say, I mean, just think of how many brick and mortar accounting firms there are. There are
That's true.
so many accounting firms, right? Like
Yes.
EY is not the only accounting firm. Your mom and dad's, accounting firm is not the only one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't think I mind having market saturation because I'm sure someone will find the right fit. I mean, my accountant, I mean, emotionally, I adore my accountant. I don't, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to leave him because, but I think to your point, I think trust, then that goes back to why do I trust this accountant more than I trust another accountant, right? Even though there's market saturation. So of course, I don't know the answer to that, but I think the dialogue that we're having here, I would love to just point out there is a nuanced difference between a market saturation and then a market saturation of like not trusted things. And how do you even trust an
Yeah.
accounting firm? We're just kind of brainstorming at this point, but
Yeah,
yeah.
this is a good point. No, no, this is a good point. And actually,
Yeah.
my question is also that I'm trying to answer is where do you see the space moving in terms of like evolution of the agent? Will the agent be kind of like fully cross chain, pushing different tasks because the integration will be better? Or we will move in a, for example, like your account example is we will move in an agent with a very specific vertical, with a very specific market, kind of playing with a specific target persona in a specific location or something, right? Because more
Yeah.
focus you have, because for example, if I need to have a user, I would say, okay, I want to have this agent helping me in, I don't know, in a New York tax jurisdiction that I can believe he has a track record on that, right? But in the same time, when we see framework development has more integration, and basically you as an integration kind of partner, you want to be everywhere, right? So that's also the question: where are we moving, or where do we want this space to move? But no matter what, we need more attestation and we need more social graph, and we can get track record by those agents. If not,
Yeah.
consumers would be impossible actually to decide.
Yeah, and I think as we're talking about the social graph, I think to even be even more technical, it's like maybe it's a context graph. It's a way of like how do we index, how do we query, and I think to go back to the point of the option one or the option two, which is my understanding of this is I have a VC hat on, and then I have like what is my like tech visionary hat on. From the VC hat, the investor hat, we already see in the ecosystem that a lot of verticals are hyper verticalizing. So I'm going to make a very simple example is 10 years ago, let's say we had just dating apps in the market today. Now we have hyper verticalization in dating apps. So much so that it's not even just like dating apps based off of religion or, sexual orientation or whatever. Now then we even have like social apps where you can hang out for just your specific interest groups. Like you're into music and you go hang out with music. So hyper verticalization is happening, obviously not just with the dating apps, it's hyper verticalization across any kind of industry, even down to the car market, as we talked about earlier, right? Then so that's kind of like the VC hat. Then you have the tech hat, like kind of the tech vision here. Then this goes back into, not to beat a dead horse, but the vision that I truly believe is that for all of this fragmentation and market saturation to work, you need to have, again, that context graph layer and the ability for all this to communicate together. And a data point to kind of prove that theory is that humans today, and now computers and humans are very different, but like computers are built by humans, right? And so if you look at today, even though we speak different languages, you and I have a different, origin language that we speak, we are still all able to communicate with each other because we have a standardized or a socially normalized platform for all of us to coordinate and communicate together. So then it's not going to look like a social media platform
Yes.
it's not going to look like a social media platform for agents. But the vision here is, what is the analogy? What is the social media platform? And so that's why we talk about network effects, social graphs. What is that version for agents? And so that is again beyond kind of the consumer vision, because the consumer vision is going to be a reflection of the zeitgeist of consumer behavior and consumer taste. What's gonna be popular 5 years from now is gonna be different from right now. But what is that framework that makes it possible for the Facebooks, the Instagrams, the TikToks, the Vines to even exist? This shared social platform for agents.
100%, 100%. I actually like how you put it, and I think you already like answered my question, like how the kind of like 6 to 12 months looks like, right? But I think yeah, we need to get kind of like this done, but the space is also like moving so fast, and I'm sure like we are meeting in Denver, and everything will be almost like changed, and in the same time I'm also like very excited because if you look at this cycle, and I'm always trying to look around. I don't know if like we can say in this streaming, but if you look about intelligence percentage, like when you're looking at use case right now, if you look at the age of builders, they're all kind of like could be like the majority are kind of also Web 2 AI PhDs. So like there is such a kind of like inflow of technical minds that also gave me a lot of kind of like saying, okay, they're coming because also the nature of Web 3, fetching always data, fully collaboration. So it's something that kind of like is missing when you have siloed databases that you can actually not fetch, not just for data, but also the collaboration. So this is very excited as kind of like seeing kind of like how the space and inflow of these great minds, right? And we have a big responsibility here for sure. Yeah.
I think that's beautifully said. I think responsibility is a very, very good word, especially
Oh
especially
yeah.
for how do we yeah, how do we build this industry responsibly? How do we communicate responsibly? I mean, I think
Yes.
responsibility is a beautiful word. And I think
Yeah.
also speaking of responsibility, one thing I really want to touch on, I think even the insanity and the rate, the speed, you bring up a lot, the speed, this rate, because at this point we are humans trying to catch up with the speed and rate of agents being created or the speed and rate of agents conducting a certain task. So now we're at a point where it's like we're trying to compete with Olympians every single day. And I don't know if you've ever ran next to an Olympian runner. I don't know about you, but I cannot run as fast as an Olympian runner, nor have the same endurance as an Olympian
Oh
runner.
yes,
And so
and
now we are,
motivation.
yeah, or right, or yeah, don't even get me started on motivation. But like now we are producing at hyper rates tons. If these AI agents are tons of Olympians, we're making tons of Olympians, and they're just producing. And so now it's an endurance race. So yeah, we're on an endurance race phase kind of
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
it's not. I remember who was telling that we are in a marathon, not a sprint, right? Especially on the Asian
Yes.
side. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. No, thank you so much, Sydney. I think it was great. We definitely should do some kind of like part two, probably like before Denver when there is a lot of things being
Ooh.
shipped. Because right now
Ooh.
everything is cooking. So excited. Thank you
I
so much also like for this kind of thought leadership kind of ideas. I think is excited to be the space. And anything else you want to kind of like to finishing up?
No, in the next few days, I believe we'll be dropping the white paper on the social graph, on the context graph. So if anyone's interested in terms of how to coordinate the agents,
Oof,
you'll see the
yes.
first draft of that. Yeah,
Nice, nice, awesome.
yeah.
Sounds good. We're looking forward. Thank you so much, Sydney, and looking forward for next time. And